Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for August 16th, 2017. On today's show, we'll be diving into the water cooler, talking about the Defiant Ones, an It Haunted House in Hollywood, and Pokemon Go. In the news, we're going to be talking about X-Men Dark Phoenix, Samuel Jackson's future in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Ozark Season 2, MoviePass, James Bond, Gremlins 3, and Louis C.K.'s secret film. And in the mailbag, we'll be attempting to answer the question of movies that we like, but we wish were better. On today's show, I have with me Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's up?
And Brad Oman.
Hello.
Guys, we're here by the water cooler. It's right next to me. So I thought I'd start talking about what I did over the weekend, and that was binge watching the Defiant Ones, the miniseries on HBO. It's a series, or I guess it's a documentary miniseries, and it follows Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine, the record producer, the two guys that basically created Beats, the headphones Beats, which were obviously purchased by Apple for, I think, $3 billion or something insane. The documentary, I think it's like 4 episodes long. It's not something I thought I was going to want to see because I'm not a big, rap, hip-hop movie fan. I like Dr. Dre, and I have seen Straight Outta Compton, and so I kind of know his story. But the story that was more interesting to me in this documentary miniseries is Jimmy Iovine, because I really didn't know his story. This, record producer that came from nothing and basically, is now on top of the world. Like, he's been involved in so many great albums from great artists, and even if you don't like music, this is just from a business perspective and an interesting rise into stardom, or into influencing popular culture perspective. It's a great series, and obviously it starts heavy with the beginning scene starts with basically that Beats deal leaking before it was signed by this video from Tyrese, of all people, who was hanging out with Dr. Dre, and the controversy that caused. But these guys are, obviously people that never did things the way that they were should be done, always doing things the way in their own way, and I think it's something that everybody, I think, would get a kick out of. So check that out, the Defiant Ones on HBO. Ben, what have you been up to?
So on Sunday night, right in the middle of Twin Peaks and Game of Thrones, I took a break from that and went over to the corner of Hollywood and Vine to experience what they're calling the It Experience Neibolt House Hollywood, which is this super elaborate recreation of the house that's going to be appearing in the upcoming movie adaptation of Stephen King's It. This thing is really, really impressive. I cut together a video of some footage and stuff that I shot there on the scene, and I show a little bit of what happens inside the haunted house experience. I tried to keep that part to a minimum just for the people who are actually going to be able to go and check it out. This thing came online, tickets became available, and within a matter of hours, because it's a free event in Los Angeles, it's sold out, or basically all of the spots were booked up because, again, it's free. But I talked to people there, and they said that they are going to be accepting walk-ups. So if anybody is in LA between now and September 10th, that's when this thing is going to be open. I would encourage you to stop by that corner and go check it out if you can. They are going to be sort of slotting people in if other people don't show up or whatever, if they have some free slots in there. But for me, again, you can sort of watch the video and really get a sense of how impressive this thing looks. The house looks exactly like it does in the movies, the trailers and stuff anyway. I haven't seen the movie yet, but the tiny details are the best part of this thing. It's sort of like the Haunted Mansion at Disney World or Disneyland, where it's not super scary, but I was way more impressed than terrified with the experience overall, just because of how much time and effort they put into setting the stage, and really the production design is the most amazing thing about the whole thing. So I would just recommend, if you're in the Hollywood area between now and September 10th, try to go check it out.
Yeah, and I would say check out Ben's video on slashfilm.com. It's impressively shot, and you mentioned it in the video, but this is basically a location that's just usually a parking lot, and they have transformed within a week into this haunted house. I was a little disappointed that it is not going to be a haunted house at Universal Studios Hollywood Horror Nights, because I feel like that would be a perfect promotional opportunity to.
Yeah, and they can time it better to the release of the movie, because the movie comes out on September 8th. So it'll be open for like a couple days after the movie is out for those who are around there.
For sure. I remember last year at Comic-Con, I was with Brad Oman, and he was pulling out his phone trying to catch Pokemon. This year, not so much. But I hear Brad has caught the Pokemon bug once again. Brad, how did the app crack pull you back in?
I mean, I've caught a lot of bugs because there's a lot of bug Pokemon. That's just what you do.
Yes.
No, yeah, I wasn't playing it much at Comic-Con this year, mostly because I was too busy and I was kind of conserving phone battery, and it kind of became a little bit stagnant. During that time, there wasn't anything super exciting going on. They had just revamped the gyms, but it wasn't anything that I was particularly interested in. But then the same weekend that Comic-Con was happening, Pokemon Go Fest was happening in Chicago, and it was absolutely...
Wait, there's a convention for Pokemon Go?
This was the first one that they had, and it was a special event where like you paid for tickets, and they had like a certain area where there was going to be rare Pokemon spawning, and they were also announcing they were having a competition for whichever teams caught the most Pokemon during the festival, that their team's legendary Pokemon would be the first one released to the game to the rest of the public. Pokemon Go Fest itself was kind of a disaster. There was a lot of tech sites that were writing about it. Like the game kept crashing. The servers apparently somehow were not prepared for the amount of traffic they were getting. Like, you can go find a video online of like the worst moments of Pokemon Go where like people are booing and they're chanting "We can't fucking play" and stuff like that. It was embarrassing, but like they made up for it by refunding everybody's tickets, and they like extended the gameplay for all the rare Pokemon in Chicago for a couple days after the festival and everything. So now that that's over, they've had some other events going on. Right now they have a festival that's happening in Japan, but anyway, after Pokemon Go Fest in Chicago happened, they started releasing the legendary Pokemon each week that you can now get at the gyms by participating in what are raid boss fights. And basically what you do is you get a bunch of people together at the gyms wherever there's a raid going on, and you all cooperate to take down a big Pokemon. And then at the very end, you get a chance to catch it. And so this includes Pokemon, the Articuno, Zapdos, Moltres, Lugia. And so like these big boss Pokemon you play to catch. And this has been really fun. And I didn't get to do this much before until I accidentally stumbled upon a group that was doing a raid together. And I found out that there's like a little community in my town that they have a WhatsApp where they all talk and plan like what time to go and do certain raids. And so I've been getting back into it, and I've been catching some of the legendary Pokemon now.
What's interesting thing is that this Pokemon Go app is based on this Google app called Ingress that was previously, and basically the whole point of that app was getting together with other people to take down these like stations around the world. So it's interesting that they're now incorporating that in Pokemon Go. But that's interesting because now it's becoming more of a community experience than just single player, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's been really fun lately, and it's actually pretty challenging to catch the legendary Pokemon. Like I've been with groups and we've defeated, plenty of them, but catching them can be really difficult because they have a very high CP, and you only get a certain number of balls based on how you perform during the raid battle to catch it. And they can be very difficult to catch. I've only caught 5 legendary Pokemon so far.
Okay, guys, follow me into the newsroom. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff. Ben, you wrote in this article on the site about X-Men Dark Phoenix. They may have cast Paper Town's actress as Dazzler. What do we know?
Yes, actress Halston Sage, who has been in movies like The Bling Ring, Paper Towns, The First Time, Goosebumps, Neighbors, a bunch of stuff. But she's basically played really small roles.
Basically nothing that you have seen.
Well, movies that are like decent. I mean, a lot of people saw Neighbors, but I couldn't tell you anything about Halston Sage, the actress, because she's throughout most of her career so far just been playing, sort of super supporting roles. There's this website called Omega Underground that says that Sage has been cast as Dazzler in Simon Kinberg's upcoming X-Men Dark Phoenix. Dazzler is a pop star in the X-Men universe who is also a mutant who can change sound waves into light energy, some sort of weird. Her character is super weird, and I think was actually invented as a cross promotion with a record company. So it's there's a lot of weird history going on there, as is typical for a lot of the X-Men, backstories. But we know that Dazzler is going to be in this movie. She was teased in X-Men Apocalypse, but didn't end up showing up in that film. So we know that Dazzler has a small role in this movie, and the character of Dazzler actually has a small part in the Dark Phoenix storyline in the comics, so it makes sense that she would be in it. Basically, the article I wrote just sort of gathers a bunch of evidence of why Halston Sage is going to be playing Dazzler in this film. She hasn't been officially announced yet by the studio, but there's a lot of evidence, which you can read in the article, that points to her being the person to play Dazzler. Ultimately, I think when this whole thing is over, Dazzler is not going to be that big of a role in this movie. As the title indicates, this is probably going to be much more about Jean Grey and Sophie Turner, who plays Jean Grey, her story. But yeah, interesting for the hardcore Dazzler fans out there.
So she's going to continue to have a supporting role in movies.
I believe so. Hopefully, it'll be enough where she can actually make an impression. And that's not, it's not really her fault. It's just the roles that she's been given so far haven't really left much of an impact on me.
Brad, Samuel Jackson is one of the only actors that probably won't be in Avengers Infinity War or Avengers 4. What do we know?
Yeah, looks like Samuel Jackson hasn't gotten the call to appear in the next two Avengers movies, and he definitely didn't get the call while Black Panther was in production. And since that's now in post-production, it seems like the best that they would be able to do to bring him into that movie would be to shoot some kind of credit scene with him. But knowing Marvel, unless the story calls for it, they're probably not going to figure out a way to shoehorn him in there just because Samuel Jackson was playfully annoyed that he's one of the few black actors who isn't getting called in to do a role in Black Panther. As for the Avengers movies, there's probably more of an opportunity to fit Sam Jackson into the proceedings somehow. I don't think he'll show up in Infinity War.
Yeah, they finished shooting that a few weeks ago, a month ago.
Yeah, exactly. I think they just finished last month, and they just started Avengers 4, so there's plenty of time for them to get Samuel Jackson in to shoot a role for that. You would think that they would have let him know so they could bring him in and have his schedule available for a certain part, but considering the number of people that are in here, I'm sure that if he's in it, it would be a small amount of time that would be required of him to shoot. And then even so, it's they could easily have something that's shot in post-production and a reshoot if it's just a cameo, which, the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe was kicked off by a Samuel Jackson cameo in the credit scene of Iron Man. Yeah. So that wouldn't be a surprise. If anything, I hope that they figure out a way to get him in there, simply because, he is the guy who kicked off, the entire MCU by asking Tony Stark to become the Avengers Initiative, even though it didn't become exactly what he thought it would be. Now, I have an interesting thought in mind, since it's been announced that Samuel Jackson will be co-starring in Captain Marvel with Brie Larson, a movie that will also introduce the Skrulls to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Part of me wonders if we'll get the revelation in that movie that the iteration of Nick Fury that we know is maybe a Skrull. It would be kind of interesting if we find out, the reason that he only has, one eye or whatever is because maybe inside that eye you can see that he's an alien or something like that. Huh. But then again, I'm not entirely sure how the Skrulls function as a species, because you would think that there would have been a time that people would have noticed that he was an alien, especially in Captain America Winter Soldier when he almost gets killed by being taken out by some pretty high caliber ammunition by the Winter Soldier. So unless that they can change their anatomy to make it look like they aren't alien in any way, I'm not sure that he would have been able to keep that a secret. But it would be an interesting twist if that were the case.
The thing is, the scheduling for Infinity War and Avengers 4, I remember talking to Kevin Feige the head of Marvel Studios, and he said, one day there could be a book written about the trouble that they had to go through to schedule and make that movie. So I think if he had a role in this movie that wasn't invented for reshoots or something, he would know about it at this point.
Well, I don't know because I mean, you have to remember, he wasn't aware of the fact that he was going to be in Captain Marvel when the rumor came out, and he didn't even know that he was going to be Nick Fury with two eyes until the announcement came at Comic-Con. So it doesn't seem like they're really keeping him in the loop when it comes to what's going on with this character.
Maybe they just know that they can get Samuel Jackson anytime they need him. Ozark is a show on Netflix. It launched just a couple weeks ago. It's a show I've been watching. I binged my way through it. Have either of you seen Ozark?
No, it's the next thing on my list.
It's definitely worth watching. Jason Bateman stars and produced it, and he directed, I think, the last two episodes. Netflix has just announced in quick order that Ozark Season 2 is going to happen. The show I would describe as Breaking Bad meets Justified. So if you have seen either of those shows or both of those shows and you like both those shows, you'll probably like Ozark. It's highly recommended by me. It's not perfect, but it's very good. And it definitely sets up a second season that is going to be probably different than the first season, which I like when TV shows do that. So I'm excited about that. What also I'm excited about, Brad, is MoviePass. It's the thing I used to have in the past. It's this card service that lets you go see as many movies as you want, one a day, for a subscription price. And I think last I heard it was like $50 or $60 or $70 in LA. I didn't have it when it changed their prices, but they just announced that the price is going to be dropping to $9.99 a month. What do we know?
Yeah, it's so ever since its inception in 2011, it's MoviePass has kind of changed how it operates. When they first started, they were very loose as far as the unlimited movies were concerned. It didn't matter what time of day you were going to see a movie; you could just see it as long as you were there at the location and checking in. Then they introduced this 24-hour thing where if you saw a movie at 7:00 on a Thursday, you couldn't see a movie again until after 7:00 on Friday, which was kind of annoying for users who were, pulling off double features by seeing a movie like a late show and then catching the midnight show for the next movie or something like that. So that was very frustrating. And then just last year, they introduced a new pricing tier where you could pay different amounts depending on if you wanted to pay a certain amount for a fixed number of movies or a higher amount for unlimited movies. And depending on where you live, the pricing tier could have been higher. Like you said, in Los Angeles, it sounds like it was much more expensive for you. For me here in the Midwest, where I don't live in the Chicago city limits, I live in Northwest Indiana, it was much cheaper. I've been paying $35 a month. But now they're completely changing their model, and now no matter where you live, you get to pay $10 a month, and you can see one movie every day, just no IMAX or 3D movies. This is really cool because it's the cheapest MoviePass has ever been, and I think it's going to be a great way to get more people to finally take notice and take advantage of the service. Because
how is this profitable for them? Like, this seems like a losing gig because in LA, a movie ticket to a 2D movie is more money than $9.99. So if I use it once a month, I'm saving money.
So the way it's explained in this article, and there's some business stuff here, is that so MoviePass just got bought by this company called Helios and Matheson Analytics Inc. And they're throwing a lot of money at MoviePass because the intention is to build the customer base, so that they can also use this as a way to mine the users for information about viewing habits and opportunities for future marketing potentials and things like that. And then the hope for MoviePass as a company is that they want to show the movie theater chains that they can help build their customer base by offering the subscription service and getting people into theaters to spend money on concessions, because that's where the bread and butter is for movie theaters. Most the way movie theaters operate is you're giving most of your ticket price back to the distributor. When you're selling a ticket, you get barely any money the first week of release, and you get a little bit more as time goes on. But movie theaters make their money from concessions, and so if people are going to see movies more often than they are now, and as we've seen, attendance has been low because of high ticket prices, then the movie theaters will see that they're seeing an increase in their attendance because of MoviePass, and MoviePass is hoping to be able to strike some kind of deal for the profits that will come from getting people into movie theaters again.
See, that's smart because you're essentially getting this credit card from MoviePass to buy these tickets. You have to do this thing with the app, and it's a little complicated, but that's essentially what's happening. And I would assume now that this is $9.99, and if everybody jumps on board this, if a movie theater chain like AMC sees that they're selling, $10 million worth of tickets each week to people from a MoviePass account, then now MoviePass can be like, let's buy the tickets for cheaper from you. Do you know what I mean? And it becomes a thing. So that seems smart. I'm still skeptical that this is going to last. I don't think MoviePass as a company has planned things out quite that much, because I've tried to sign up for MoviePass today when they announced this, and their website has been down all day. So I'm not sure.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so because I went to it earlier, and at the very least it was up and running. But maybe they're just, I don't know, maybe they're getting like high volume today with the new change and everything.
For sure. I just don't think they were prepared for the onslaught. But this is something to watch. I definitely want to try this out, and I'm sure either you or someone will write this up for slashfilm.com, what the experience is like now that they've changed to a $9.99 service. Let's move on to James Bond. Ben, you're a resident Bond expert. What is going on in the Bond watch?
Yeah, so there's just been, as usual with any James Bond movie, a flood of unverified reports and all sorts of crazy rumors and stuff about what the new Bond movie is going to be, whether or not Daniel Craig is going to be in it. The New York Times got into the fray recently, saying that that Craig is definitely coming back. That's what their sources are telling them, all this stuff. Now Daniel Craig himself has spoken with a Boston morning radio show, and he said, quote, "No decision has been made at the moment. There's a lot of noise out there, and nothing official has been confirmed. And I'm not like holding out for more money or doing anything like that. It's just all very personal decisions to be made at the moment. I know they're desperate to get going, and I would, in theory, love to do it, but there is no decision just yet." So as of right now, Daniel Craig is not officially coming back to play James Bond yet. There's still the possibility that he could come back. A theory I've heard is that he is not making an official statement about this, or hasn't really signed on, or signed on the dotted line, and Eon Productions hasn't officially announced him, and because he's in this new movie Logan Lucky, Steven Soderbergh's new film, and he plays a supporting role in that film, and that movie comes out very soon, and the thought is like maybe let him have his Logan Lucky moment, and then we'll deal with the Bond stuff afterwards, just so it doesn't turn all of the press around Logan Lucky into even more Bond-centric stuff than it would be otherwise. So that reasoning makes sense to me. I'm not sure if that's officially what Craig and the companies are, have agreed to, behind the scenes, behind closed doors or anything like that, but I like that theory because I think Craig's performance in Logan Lucky is really good and does deserve some to be considered, aside from this Bond nonsense, and B, just because it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a respectful tactic and a respectful way to approach the situation, and there's no need to, we already know that a Bond movie is coming. Bond fans are, they've been made to wait much longer than what we're going to have to wait here to find out whether or not Craig is officially coming back. So we'll see how it plays out.
For sure. Our TV writer, Fred Topel, is at the TCAs. He talked to Chris Columbus in an interview that's going to be published on the site later this week. But on the site now, you can read, he talked to him about Gremlins 3, which has been written, and there is a script. Columbus says that he's really proud of the script. It's a twisted and dark as anything, so we'll see. It's always budgetary conversation when we're going to shoot it. One, to get back to the really twisted sensibility of the first movie, I found there was a very easy place for me to fall back into and start writing again, so hopefully we'll see that movie again. By the way, Chris Columbus, not the Explorer, has written some of the great movies of like of the 80s. So I'm excited for him to get back to screenwriting as well as see a Gremlins story. He also mentioned that Fred brought up the concept of Gizmo's kind of responsible for all these deaths. Like if Gizmo wasn't around to get wet, it wouldn't lead to all this murder. And Columbus said, very good observation. And he basically, should Gizmo be eliminated? He said that comes up in the movie, certainly. So that's kind of interesting. And but you can read the whole Gremlins 3 part of the interview on the site right now. Are either of you excited for Gremlins 3?
I think Brad maybe would be more than me, just because you're probably a bigger fan of the original movie and maybe its sequel. I don't know, but I never really. I've seen the Gremlins movies, but they didn't really. I saw them later in life. I saw them when I was in like late high school or something, so I didn't see them at that young age that everyone else seems to, where it really, left like an indelible impact on your childhood. So, and same with Goonies for me too, which is another movie that Chris Columbus wrote. I came to that film late, so it didn't really have the same impact on me that it did for the rest of the people in my generation.
And I should mention that Chris Columbus, because I mentioned earlier, wrote Gremlins, he wrote Goonies, he wrote Young Sherlock Holmes, Gremlins 2, then he kind of like fell off the map of screenwriting, just did some directing. So
I just hope he gets back to exploring someday.
We get what?
I just hope he gets back to exploring someday.
Oh, yeah. And
totally worth it.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Louis C.K. has directed a secret film called I Love You, Daddy. Brad, you wrote the article for slashfilm.com. What do we know?
Nothing. It's a secret. End of story.
Okay, and now in the mailbag.
No. It's we do know a little bit about it because it was announced because it will be premiering at the Toronto International Film Festival, which kicks off up in Canada on September 7th and lasts through September 17th. It's a movie that he shot under the radar in New York City, shot on 35 millimeter and black and white. Not only did he write and direct it, but he also stars in it, just like he does with his FX series Louis. And in the movie, which is called I Love You, Daddy, he plays a TV producer who has a daughter named China, who is played by Chloe Grace Moretz. As far as the story, that's pretty much all we know. We don't know what the movie will be about, as far as like what kind of story is being told or how the relationships work in the movie or anything like that. But it does have an interesting cast, which features Charlie Day, John Malkovich, Edie Falco, Rose Byrne, Helen Hunt, and Pamela Adlon, who is fresh off an Emmy nomination for the FX series Better Things, which is executive produced by Louis C.K.
Interesting. I'm excited to see this. I like most of the stuff that Louis C.K. does. So let's go into the mailbag right now, guys. Mailbag, we attempt to answer a question sent in by you, the viewer. You can send your question to peter@slashfilm.com. It can have anything to do with anything pop culture or not pop culture. It could be a personal question. I don't know if I'm going to answer it, but you can send it. Please mention your name and general geographic location in case we mention the question on the air. We can't get to all questions, but try us. On today's mailbag, Angelo Thomas from Louisville, Kentucky asks, what's a movie that you still enjoy but ultimately wish it were better than it is? Mine would have to be Polar Express. I love the story and the idea of it, and Tom Hanks is excellent as always, but I can't get past the creepy animation. Thanks for taking my question and keep up the good work. Okay, guys, I'll start this off. I think for me, the number one film that came to my mind when thinking of this question is Tron Legacy. It's a film I did quite enjoy, but I don't feel like it quite hits the levels that I wanted it to. I mean, it definitely didn't hit with critics and audiences in the way that they wanted it to. I think we needed more action than just that upfront bike chase and that whole sequence at the front of the movie, or like the first beginning of the second act. And And I would have liked to see a sequel, but I'm not sure how you could improve it. I don't have that answer. But it's a film that I do hold in esteem, even though it is flawed. Ben, what do you have?
My pick would be Avatar, because that movie is just so visually spectacular, and James Cameron is a complete master filmmaker, but I wish that he would have written the script with maybe a couple other people or something, and just I don't know, honed the concept a little bit more, so it wasn't quite as much of a pastiche of, you know, a patchwork collection of all of these tropes that we'd seen before. That script is just it's so I mean, it's functional, and James Cameron is a guy who's all about you know, process and like how things work, and he's very mechanically minded like that.
He's definitely not about dialogue.
Yeah, and I just wish that, like, the concept is so cool and the visuals are so cool. I just wish the script was up to the level of the rest of the movie.
Brad, how about you?
You know, I'm going to come right out of the gate with this one. And for some reason, it seems whenever we write about this movie, everyone automatically assumes that we absolutely hate it, and this is not the case. There's some redeeming, enjoyable things about this movie, but it's just not on the level that I wish it was. And that's Ghostbusters: Answer the Call. I don't think it's an awful movie. It's got problems for sure. It's not the movie that I hoped it would be.
It's not a Ghostbusters movie is my problem with it.
Here's the thing. I don't have a problem with the humor being different from the original Ghostbusters. I don't need a retread of the original Ghostbusters. That's why I have the original Ghostbusters on Blu-ray. I didn't want the same movie as the original Ghostbusters, and I didn't want as much fan service as I got in the new Ghostbusters to remind me that the original one still existed. But there's a lot of good ideas and some fun stuff and an interesting approach to the new having a new Ghostbusters that I just wish that it was mined for more potential. And I think some of that potential can be fixed by figuring out a way to have them exist in the same universe. I've written about this extensively online before, but it's just, yeah.
We'll include that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also like that movie. I think Zach Woods is phenomenal in it. Anything where you give Zach Woods more scenes would probably improve the film a little bit. And I agree with you, Brad. I think there's a lot of funny stuff in there. The leads are all really good. But yeah, a little less fan service would probably have gone a long way with that one.
I agree on both those counts. Another movie that I would put on this list is Wall-E, which is a beloved Pixar film. It's beloved in my heart, but I feel like, you know, that opening 20-30 minutes is incredible, and the last 20-30 minutes is not quite as incredible. I guess you could probably say the same with Up, and you know, I mean, it's but Wall-E, I love. I have, you know, statues of Wall-E around my house. I have art from Wall-E around my house. It's a film I really love, but I feel like that human storyline at the end is not quite what I wanted the film to be, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely magic in the first half of that film, but the human stuff has become even more, you know, prescient than it was when it came out, because of just like the advent. You know, I think that movie came out like right around the same time as the iPhone, and that just changed everything in such a big way. So it's like that movie was like prophetic. So I think the human stuff, while it's not quite as like full of movie magic as the first half, it still is like impressive in its own right, and it's in the way that it predicted a lot of human behavior. But
I mean, it's definitely impressive that a film, you know, a animated kids film like that tackles those kind of issues. And I mean, Disney is always doing that. They did with Zootopia. Brad, what do you got for us?
Man, I wish Avengers: Age of Ultron was a little bit better. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy Avengers: Age of Ultron more than most. A lot of people, it's kind of become the thing now to be like, oh, you know what, that movie's not good. I actually think it's pretty decent. It's got some great action sequences. I think the way Ultron is brought to life is done really well by James Spader. It's solid, but it's also kind of messy and a little too long and convoluted. There's just something about it that doesn't quite live up to how great it was to see the first Avengers. And part of that might just be because the magic is worn off from the Avengers appearing on screen together for the first time. But I feel like it's more so has to do with just how crammed the movie is, just full of a lot of stuff that really doesn't feel like it needs to be there. We don't really get to spend enough time with the characters to care about them as much as maybe we did the first time around. And the direction it pulls some of our characters isn't necessarily as interesting. So yeah, I wish Age of Ultron was done a little bit better.
Yeah, I don't think it's as good as it seems like you think it is. I think it's convoluted, and I think the moments of character, I go to see Avengers movies because I want to see the interaction between those heroes. And I love that scene where they're at the party and lifting the hammer, and that's like one of the best scenes in that movie. But I feel like, the dark, dramatic pull of that movie with Ultron kind of, it gives me the same worries about Thanos. I want a fun movie. And I don't need a, dark, gritty, dramatic action movie from an Avengers movie. But
no, I'm fine if it's dark. I definitely want weight with my superheroes. I don't need it to be light fluff all the time. I mean, that's
well, I'm not saying light fluff either, but I'm just saying I want to have fun with it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Ben, tell us about another movie.
Star Trek Into Darkness, guys. J.J. Abrams is obviously a super talented filmmaker. I think this movie would have been much better if they just dispensed with all of the bullshit behind the scenes about John Harrison and Khan and all that stuff. Just come right out with it in the beginning. Approach this movie from an entirely different way. And don't try to hide anything. Don't have any sort of big reveals or whatever. Just make the movie, and I think it would have been a lot better. I think that's a big part of the reason why this movie is so hated by Star Trek fandom, is because it seems like it's trying to trick you. And I don't think that cast is so great. Abrams is always terrific at casting. Just casting in general, like bringing the exact right person in for these roles. And the cast of the new Star Trek films is so fantastic. Just put them back into a movie together and let them, go crazy. I think Into Darkness would have been a lot better without that particular marketing gimmick or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I like the opening action sequence. There's a lot to like in that movie. The twist, I don't understand it because it seems like it's not a reveal to any characters in the movie.
Right.
It's just a reveal to the audience that have seen the original movie, Wrath of Khan. So, I don't know, it seems very weird. Another film I wanted to mention is Steven Spielberg's Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom. It is a movie that I've grown to love a lot more, but it's a movie that I feel like doesn't quite live up to Raiders of the Lost Ark or Last Crusade. It definitely is better than Crystal Skull, but we won't mention that. I think, the villain change from the Nazis to Mola Ram, is a little jarring. It's a little different, having, this kind of voodoo mysticism is a little different than this godlike powers. For whatever reason. I know it's magic, but it's weird. Something about it rubs me the wrong way. I've grown to love Mola Ram. I have a statue of Mola Ram in my office. But for some reason, every time I watch it, I see the movie it could have been, and I think it could have been better than Raiders of the Lost Ark. But it's just a good movie nonetheless. Ben, do you have another one for us?
Yeah, I would say, and this is sort of a catch-all, I would say almost every James Bond movie, so I recently went back and watched every Bond film in order, like one a month leading up to the release of Spectre, and came away with a sort of shocking realization, which is I don't like a lot of the James Bond movies. I thought I did, and, watching them, like on TV as a kid or something like that, or maybe like catching segments of it here and there, you're like, oh yeah, James Bond or whatever. But like watching them all in a row, you realize how much they copy the ones that came before, how like formula driven they are, how much the producers of these movies chase fads of whatever are popular at the time. And I think I don't know, like, I'm not smart enough to tell you the way that you can improve every single one of these films. I would say that Casino Royale, just to provide a baseline for people, I think is my favorite Bond movie. I think it handles the character so well, and I think that the character is such an icon in cinema history that he deserves better movies than the ones that are actually in existence. And I know that I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for that from hardcore Bond fans, but hey man, I'm just giving you my opinion.
Brad, do you have one final movie for us?
I have one final movie. It is The Lost World Jurassic Park. There was a lot of excitement for a Jurassic Park sequel after how big the original Jurassic Park was. No one had seen dinosaurs brought to life like that on the big screen before. That Tyrannosaurus Rex roar is still one of the most iconic sounds in cinema history. I remember, feeling that roar and hearing it in theaters for the first time, and it was just awesome. And I mean that in like the literal sense of like I was literally struck with awe. The Lost World, that shine from seeing the dinosaurs for the first time is worn off a bit. And it really feels like they tried to up the ante without really making any significant contributions to crafting a decent story. They're like, hey, you liked the T-Rex the first time? Well, here's two. And guess what? All the raptors are loose. And more dinosaurs and all this stuff. So despite the fact that...
Hey, it does have that sequence where the van is over the cliff, and that's an awesome sequence.
Oh, for sure. Like, I like The Lost World still for what it is. I don't hate it by any means.
Yeah.
But I just wish that the story was a little bit better, because despite the fact that there's a great cast here, I mean, it's great to have Jeff Goldblum at the center of a Jurassic Park movie, even if it's got this weird side plot with his daughter that doesn't make much sense. But Julianne Moore's in this movie, and
but
a
Brad,
lot of people probably forget...
gymnastics saves the day.
A lot of people probably forget that Vince Vaughn is in this movie. And Pete Postlethwaite is fantastic in this movie, as well as the Hunter. And so there's some good stuff in this movie, but it all kind of goes to hell once they get the T-Rex back to San Francisco, or is it San Diego?
San Diego.
San Diego. And the T-Rex roams free, and then we get kind of like a silly Godzilla spoof. And it's so once it gets there, I'm kind of done with it, and I think that there's a better approach to The Lost World than what we saw.
I agree. Have you ever heard the story of how Vince Vaughn was cast in that movie?
No.
It was Swingers has a scene where Vince Vaughn is in it. He's at a party, and the Jaws music is used. Like, it's like him, like this. I forget exactly what's in the scene, but he's like, I guess showing him as a predator to like a girl that he's like kind of trying to date or whatever. I don't really recall the scene, but I guess Steven Spielberg was shown that scene to give approval for the Jaws music, and that's how he like found him and was like, I'm going to cast him in a movie, and that ended up being The Lost World. So
wow,
yeah. So that's how it happens. So that does it, I think, for today's edition of the Mailbag. As always, you can send your questions to peter@slashfilm.com. Brad, we can find you on Twitter at Ethan Anderton, _ Anderton.
Ethan _ Anderton.
Yeah, and your podcast, Go Flicks Yourself, on iTunes. Ben, you can find Ben Piers on Twitter and on /film, obviously. And you can find me at /film on Twitter. Please go rate this podcast on iTunes if you're enjoying it. If you don't enjoy this podcast, please do not go rate it. Please tell your friends, share the good word, and we will see you tomorrow.